Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan, and I am back for the all-Dan takeover edition of the MDL Pregame. With that being said, we're just going to power through this week. It'll be considerably shorter than last week's 45-minute version. And let's just go ahead and get into the transactions. So, starting bottom to top, Burst drops Ferrothorn for Bronzong. I think this is generally a good increase for him. It gives him another option in Trick Room. Max Bronzong can do things more efficiently than Ferrothorn. He's not quad weak to fire, and with Heatproof, it's actually not going to be a fire weakness at all, so it'll better complement the Glastrier. Bronzong Glastrier is a good combo as well, because after setting Trick Room, Bronzong can always Rock Tomb the Glastrier to drop its speed and trigger weakness policy. So probably a good trade. I do think it speaks to... I'm not a huge fan of transacting a Pokemon multiple times unless it's for a specific reason or a specific matchup. So I'm not a huge fan of the way that he got there, but I do think Bronzong is going to fit well on the team. Ryan dropped Fletchinder for Mr. Rime. He's losing his priority Tailwind for just the overall generalized support utility that Mr. Rime can do. Probably good for his team. He wasn't setting Tailwind too consistently. I do think that the biggest impact of this is people looking at playoff transactions, not having that priority Tailwind and a tier 4 that's on a team to potentially transact could hurt some long-term playoff transaction plans. Tejas dropped Cresselia for Thundurus T. I think this is a great trade. Cresselia wasn't going to be doing too much this season, and Thundurus T does have some good matchups in the coming weeks. Noah dropped Copperajah for Umbreon again. It's still a fighting weakness, but it is not a ground weakness, and it does give him more supports instead of just another physical attacker, so probably an upgrade. I dropped Rotom Heat for Snorlax. Rotom Heat was a 1-week matchup thing, specifically to help me with my Celesteela matchup. I considered going back into Gigalith, but I figured Snorlax was actually more threatening to opposing Trick Rooms, so it is both going to be a potential Trick Room sweeper for me and a good way to keep opposing Trick Room off of me. Gumi drops the Gunadel for Togekiss. Pretty strict upgrade here because his team was very ground weak. Now he's got a ground immunity with redirection, and Togekiss just overall is going to be doing more for his team than the Gunadel was. Maxwell drops Tangela for Dusknoir. Again, Tangela wasn't doing a huge amount, and Dusknoir is going to give him a bit more consistency around Trick Room. It's basically that Dusclops that he transacted a few weeks ago. It's... I think generally gonna work out pretty well for him. And then Hector dropped G-Max Anaconda for Impidimp. Again, it's just dropping a sort of max-ish threat that wasn't doing a huge amount for actually pretty solid support in Impidimp. Impidimp is pretty underrated, so I like that one as well. But let's go ahead and hop into the matchups. So first up, we have Anthony versus Burst. This is the last week of divisional games, so these are all going to be very important. On Anthony's side, I picked the Barraskewda as his most important option, as it can hit a lot of the things on Burst's team, and it's a water type. I know it's going to be pretty frail into Glastrier, but I think a max Barraskewda could actually live a hit from a Glastrier, which is going to be pretty notable. And it will ignore the redirection from the Magmar, so it is actually going to be a threat to prevent Trick Room from going up, because it can have Steel coverage for the Aromatisse and Dark coverage for the Bronzong. For Burst, I actually picked the Landorus instead of the Glastrier this week, because I didn't want to pick Glastrier, but I do think Landorus, outside of the Barraskewda, has a pretty good matchup into a lot of what Anthony wants to do, and I think its damage output is going to be pretty substantial as an option this week. So I think that these two will be decently matched up against one another, but I do think Anthony has to be slightly favored in this matchup just from a team perspective. Up next, we have John versus Ryan. So on John's side, I'm picking the Thundurus Incarnate, because if you look at Ryan's side, Celesteela's weak to it, Azumarill's weak to it, Cottony's decently weak to it. It just hits enough things on his team that I think it's threatening if it's just the offensive Thundurus. And also, I'm picking it because on Ryan's side, I think that Azumarill has a really good matchup. Outside of the Thundurus, it beats the Marshadow, it hits the Rhyperior hard, I don't think it KOs the Mr. Rime, but with a Steel Roller Max Steel Spike, it could. It does decently into a bunch of the things on John's team. So I think that Thundurus is the best check for the Azumarill and offensively good on its own round, but I do think the Azumarill's offense is going to look pretty good for him. Up next, we got Hector versus Dark. So on Hector's side, just this Moltres looks so good. It hates the Victini and the Urshifu, obviously. It can beat that Gengar. It can deal with Golurk if he goes for some low tier stuff. It can stall out a lot of what Goodra wants to do because Goodra's not going to hit it very hard. So I just think this could be a Moltres takeover offensive week. And on Dark side, I'm actually picking the Slurpuff. This is basically a combination Slurpuff Pincurchin. I think actually looks pretty good this week because if you're able to start fake tearsing stuff and hitting it with Max Pincurchin, that's going to do a lot of damage into a lot of what Hector does. So again, I think this is going to be a pretty interesting matchup where it's going to be sort of a strength on a secondary for Hector against the secondary mode for Dark, because I think if Dark goes with his sort of core 6 that he's been going with a lot, it's not going to look great for him this season, this week. Then we've got Jess and Noah. This is a pretty high leverage match out in the red division. So on Jess's side, I am picking the Mudsdale because it's ground and it also can have body press, especially if Noah's hitting it a lot and it's getting stamina boost. That body press could do a lot. Mudsdale I think is going to be a great max threat this week. It's also going to be a threat out of max. I just think it's going to be an issue for Noah's team because stamina boost Noah does not want to see, which is why for Noah I'm picking the Gyarados because it does hit that Mudsdale very well offensively. It can also hit the Urshifu if it's maxed. It can threaten various Mew setups as well. And then if he's running Intimidate instead of Moxie, that's pretty good into things like Zarude, which I think is going to be pretty big this matchup. It also can intimidate the Mimikyu. So I think Noah's got potentially a lot going for him this week, but he really has to be aware of that Mudsdale. Then we have Gumi versus Tay. So this is an interesting one because Tay just picked up this Thundurus Tea and it actually looks really good here because the electric damage that Thundurus Tea can put out is really going to threaten that Togekiss and the Volcanion, which are Gumi's normal best offensive modes. And then Rillaboom isn't going to hit it all that hard because it's flying type. It doesn't really have good flying coverage per se, but it can run some flying moves. The Thundurus. So on Gumi's side, I actually think that the Delmise looks better than the Rillaboom as a grass option this week. Because it hits the Jirachi, it hits the Feeny, it doesn't want to see the Volcarona or the Dragonite, but it can deal decently into the Thundurus as well. So I think Delmise is going to be a sneaky pick. Like, I think Gumi, this might be the week he goes pretty hard into Trick Room against Tay, because I think his Trick Room matchup looks pretty good into Tay, and I think Tay's offensive, like, fast mode matchup looks good into Gumi. So this is going to be another contrasting style thing. Up next, we have Charles versus Dina. So Charles has got this Genesect, which can be a problem for Dina. I know Hatterene's got access to a Mystical Fire, which is kind of why I put Hatterene there, but Genesect deals pretty efficiently with Hatterene offensively. It deals with Tapu Koko decently well. It doesn't just fold to Melmetal, and it can hit it pretty hard as well. It can even deal with the Drampa pretty well, or the Vanillix pretty well. I considered putting Drampa there just because of how good this Genesect looks, but overall, I think this Genesect looks really well, which is why for Dina, I think the slow mode, relying on getting up Trick Room with this Hatterene, then maybe max flaring the Genesect, this is going to be the best plan for her that I can see just on my initial look here, which is why I think this Hatterene is going to be the crux of her plan. She's going to need to protect it with the Raichu, get it set up, and start getting those max flares and max smites rolling. Our last Blue Division matchup we're looking at is Izzy-Max versus Toxic. So we've got the Latios here, which I think actually looks really, really good. Because defensively, his Psychic mode isn't going to be hitting it super hard. Zapdos can have some Dark coverage, but that's wasting a move pool slot on it. Escavalier actually looks really good into it, which is why I picked the Escav. But it's dealing with Diggersby pretty effectively. It can deal with the Crobat. It probably doesn't want to deal with the Hail mode, but Hail looks hard to bring into Melmetal. So I just think this Latios defensively looks good and also has some output potential. For Toxic, I think that this Escav is going to be pretty huge for him. Because it does deal with the Latios. I think his Trick Room mode actually looks pretty good, even with the Melmetal, because Melmetal isn't a huge fan of dealing with this Escav. Escav can deal with the Hat pretty well. He just has to be wary of that Rotom Wash, which can be pretty effective into it. But otherwise, I do think SCAV looks decently good. I considered actually putting Scorch on Exel's side because it can efficiently deal with this SCAV. And then our last matchup we're looking at is me versus Raz. I think Sprigatoto and Quaxly are the obvious picks here, which is why I'm favored in this matchup, because Sprigatoto is a grass type and Quaxly is a water type. But our matches of the week to watch, I have to say Charles versus Dina is my choice. This is 1 and 2 in the red division, going head to head. If Dina wins, she'll clinch the 1 seed. But Charles also wants to win, because if he loses, he could actually fall out of the top 3 and have to play in the wild card. So this is a huge leverage match. The other red match to watch actually there were a bunch of red matches to watch. All of them are very important. So any of the red matches I think are super crucial this week. The blue division I'm not as familiar with the landscape of, but I think this one has to be the match to watch this week for me. So yeah, told you guys we were going to be powering through this pretty quick. Hope you guys enjoyed the all-Dan takeover of the MDL pregame. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.